The dominoes are falling faster than anyone anticipated, and the WNBA's worst nightmare is unfolding in real time. Sophie Cunningham, one of the league's most marketable stars, has reportedly walked away from American professional basketball for a payday that makes her entire WNBA career earnings look like pocket change. But here's what should terrify every fan who cares about women's basketball. Sophie isn't the endgame. She's the test case, the real target. The player this international league is willing to spend whatever it takes to acquire is Caitlin Clark. And if the money being discussed is even remotely accurate, the WNBA has absolutely no way to compete. Let's cut through the noise and look at what's actually happening here, because the implications go far beyond two players changing teams. This is about a systematic dismantling of the WNBA's foundation, funded by resources so vast they make the league's entire operating budget look insignificant. What we're witnessing isn't just player movement. It's an existential threat that could undo everything the WNBA has built over nearly 3 decades. Many of you have been sounding the alarm about this for weeks, connecting the dots between the unusual overseas recruitment activity and the league's total silence on the matter. You were onto something. The story behind the headlines reveals a coordinated effort that makes LIV Golf's disruption of men's professional golf look like a practice run. This time, the target is women's basketball, and the financial firepower being deployed is absolutely staggering. If you believe the league's biggest stars deserve to know what's really at stake here, hit that like button. It tells us you want the full story, not just the sanitized version the WNBA hopes you'll accept without question. Here's the mathematical reality that makes this crisis so severe. Under the current collective bargaining agreement, the WNBA's maximum salary sits at approximately $250,000 per year. That's the absolute ceiling for even the league's biggest stars. Role players, the athletes who aren't household names but provide essential contributions, earn between $75,000 and $150,000 annually. Now contrast that with what this new international league is putting on the table. Their baseline offer, the starting point for negotiations with average players, is reportedly $2 million per year. Read that again. The floor in this new league is 8 times higher than what many WNBA players currently earn. For stars like Sophie Cunningham, the reported offers climb into the $5 to $10 million range annually. But it gets more shocking when you look at the marquee targets. Sources suggest that elite players, the ones who drive ticket sales and television ratings, are being presented with guaranteed contracts that could exceed $100 million over multiple years. Some whispers from inside the negotiations suggest the league's signature signing could receive as much as $200 million. These aren't incremental improvements. This is a complete restructuring of what professional women's basketball players can expect to earn. Sophie Cunningham's decision suddenly makes perfect sense when you understand the numbers involved. After 6 seasons in the WNBA, building her brand, connecting with fans, and becoming one of the league's most recognizable personalities, she's reportedly secured a contract worth several million dollars per year. That single season salary exceeds everything she's earned in her entire WNBA career combined. Think about that for a moment. 6 years of professional basketball in America, building a following, enduring the grind of year-round play between the WNBA season and overseas contracts, all of it generating less total compensation than 1 season in this new league. The question isn't why Sophie would take this deal. The question is, how could anyone expect her not to? Professional athletes have limited earning windows. Careers are short, injuries are unpredictable, and the opportunity to secure generational wealth doesn't come around twice. When someone offers you financial security for life versus continuing to struggle, making ends meet while playing in multiple leagues year-round, the mathematics overwhelm every other consideration. But Sophie represents something more significant than just one player making a smart financial decision. She's the proof of concept. The message this international league is sending to every other WNBA player is crystal clear. We're not just targeting superstars for publicity. We have the resources to offer life-changing money to players at every level. If we're willing to pay millions annually to someone who's never been first team, all WNBA, imagine what we'll offer the league's absolute best. And that brings us to the player who makes this entire situation so catastrophic for the WNBA. Caitlin Clark didn't just have a successful rookie season, she fundamentally altered the trajectory of women's professional basketball in America. The viewership numbers, the sold-out arenas, the mainstream media coverage that treated WNBA games as major sporting events rather than niche content, all of it traces back to the interest Clark generated. Her arrival transformed the league's financial outlook, leading to projections of unprecedented growth and investment. Television networks restructured their programming to feature her games. Sponsors who previously showed minimal interest in women's basketball suddenly wanted in. Franchise valuations increased based largely on the assumption that the Caitlin Clark effect would continue driving expansion and revenue growth for years to come. The 2024 season represented the best moment in WNBA history, and Clark was the primary catalyst. Now imagine the WNBA without her, not just missing her on-court production, which is considerable, but missing the entire cultural phenomenon she created. The casual fans who started watching because of Clark don't necessarily stick around if she's playing overseas. The media outlets that finally gave women's basketball significant coverage aren't going to maintain that commitment if the league's biggest draw is competing in another league. The sponsors who entered or expanded their WNBA partnerships because of the attention Clark generated will reconsider those investments if the return they anticipated disappears. Reports indicate that Caitlin Clark is the International League's ultimate target, and they're prepared to offer whatever it takes to make it happen. We're talking about a contract that would make her one of the highest-paid basketball players in the world, regardless of gender. The exact figures remain closely guarded, but if Sophie Cunningham received several million annually, and she's not even among the league's top 15 players in terms of on-court production or marketability, what does that tell you about what they're willing to offer Clark? Reading between the lines of how this league has operated so far, they're not negotiating from a position of budget constraints. They're asking each target player one simple question. What would it take for you to make us your primary focus? Then they're writing checks that make saying no feel financially irresponsible. The WNBA finds itself in an impossible position. Commissioner Cathy Engelbert has spent years working to build the league's profile, secure better television deals, and improve player conditions. The 2024 season represented the culmination of those efforts with record attendance and unprecedented mainstream interest. And now, just as everything seemed to be coming together, this international threat emerges with financial resources the league simply cannot match. Drop a comment about what you think happens if Caitlin Clark actually leaves, because the scenarios being discussed in basketball circles range from concerning to absolutely catastrophic for the league's future. Engelbert's position has become increasingly precarious, and not just because of this international competition. Throughout the 2024 season, she faced mounting criticism from multiple directions. Players, including stars like Nafisa Collier, publicly called out the league office for inadequate responses to safety concerns. The unprecedented attention that came with Clark's arrival brought larger crowds, more intense fan behavior, and unfortunately, incidents of harassment that the league seemed unprepared to handle. Athletes felt abandoned. They were generating enormous interest and value for the league, facing increased scrutiny and sometimes aggressive fan behavior, and the response from leadership felt slow, inadequate, and disconnected from their daily reality. When players speak publicly about feeling unsupported by their own league office, that's not just a communication problem, that's a fundamental breakdown in the relationship between labor and management. Beyond safety issues, the salary structure became an increasingly sore point. Engelbert's repeated defense that player compensation reflects the league's current revenue model rings hollow when athletes see massive television deals being signed, sponsorship money flowing in, and ticket prices rising, while their own paychecks remain relatively stagnant. The argument that the league needs to grow before salaries can substantially increase creates a circular problem. Players feel they're the ones generating that growth, but not benefiting proportionally from it. Her handling of various controversies throughout the season didn't help. Some of her public comments were perceived as tone-deaf, particularly when addressing the racial dynamics within the league and the sports fan base. In an era when athletes increasingly expect their commissioners to be vocal advocates for player welfare and social justice, Engelbert's more corporate, cautious approach left many players feeling unheard and unsupported. Now she faces the defining challenge of her tenure, and possibly an insurmountable one. If the WNBA loses Caitlin Clark to an overseas league, how could Engelbert possibly survive as commissioner? The optics would be absolutely devastating. The most important player in the history of the league, walking away during what should have been a triumphant period of growth, would represent a fundamental failure of leadership. Sources close to the league's Board of Governors suggest emergency meetings have already been held. Team owners who invested significant capital based on projections of continued growth are reportedly furious that the league wasn't better prepared for this type of competitive threat. The question being asked isn't whether the commissioner has a plan to retain the league's stars. The question is whether any plan could possibly work, given the massive financial disparity. And that's where this situation becomes truly complex. Because even if you wanted to blame Engelbert for everything, the underlying problem may be unsolvable within the WNBA's current economic structure. The league operates within the financial realities of a still developing women's sports market in the United States. Despite recent growth, the WNBA is not yet profitable on its own, requiring ongoing financial support from the NBA. Revenue from ticket sales, television contracts, and sponsorships has been increasing, but remains modest compared to established leagues. The idea that the WNBA could suddenly match 8-figure annual salaries or $100 million guaranteed contracts simply isn't realistic given the current business model. The money doesn't exist. You can't spend revenue you don't have. This creates an impossible situation. Engelbert cannot magically produce the financial resources needed to compete with sovereign wealth funds from the Middle East. Yet she'll likely be held responsible when players leave for obviously superior financial opportunities. It's a classic setup for failure. She's being blamed for a problem that may have no solution within the existing constraints of the league's economics. But here's the thing. Whether that's fair or not might be beside the point in professional sports. Commissioners are ultimately judged by results. Losing your league's biggest stars to a competitor is considered an unacceptable result, regardless of the underlying circumstances or the impossible nature of the challenge. The broader pattern here is deeply concerning for anyone who cares about American women's sports. This isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a much larger strategy of Saudi Arabian investment in global sports. Over the past several years, we've watched Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund systematically target and disrupt established sports properties. Live Golf provides the clearest blueprint. Launched in 2022, it directly challenged the PGA Tour by offering guaranteed contracts worth hundreds of millions to top golfers. Phil Mickelson reportedly received $200 million. Dustin Johnson got $125 million. The financial incentives were too large to ignore, despite significant criticism about the Saudi government's human rights record. The PGA Tour initially resisted, even suspended players who joined Live Golf, but the financial pressure eventually forced a dramatic reversal. In 2023, they announced a framework agreement to essentially merge with Live Golf, admitting they couldn't compete with Saudi money and needed to find a way to coexist. Now the same playbook is being applied to women's basketball. The same overwhelming financial resources, the same strategy of offering money so enormous that refusing feels financially irresponsible. The same end goal of either taking over the sport or forcing the established league into a position where they have to negotiate from weakness. If this international league successfully recruits even a handful of major stars, the WNBA faces an existential crisis. The momentum from 2024 evaporates. The growth projections that drove recent investment and television deals become questionable. The narrative shifts from a league on the rise to a league watching its best talent flee for better opportunities overseas. Before we go, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on. This story is developing rapidly, and we're going to keep tracking every move as this crisis unfolds. Next, we'll be breaking down exactly what leverage the WNBA actually has in these negotiations, if any, and whether there's any path forward that doesn't end with the league losing its biggest stars. The behind-the-scenes negotiations are revealing some surprising dynamics you need to understand. The WNBA spent years building toward this moment of breakthrough success. Now they're watching it potentially slip away to an international competitor with effectively unlimited resources. Sophie Cunningham's departure is just the beginning. The real battle is for Caitlin Clark, and right now, it's not clear the WNBA has any weapons in this fight.